Hello and welcome to another episode of Two Average Joes. How you doing, Mr. Baker?
Good. You?
We're doing good. And we're going to redo and go over some information from our last episode talking about the first victim. I know you found some more information.
I did. A lot.
Okay, give us a little bit here. Tell us a little bit about Mary's situation that we didn't address on the first issue.
Okay. The first thing was, and I had mentioned it a little bit, that John Norman Collins at the time, upon information and belief, was in the Theta Chi fraternity in Ypsilanti, the Eastern Michigan University branch of that. And I have, through my, superior Google skills, found out that at least as of the most recent thing that I could find on Google, that house, that fraternity house, was at 510 Cross Street in Ypsilanti. The victim lived at 413 Washtenaw Avenue in Ypsilanti also, which is actually 0.2 of a mile away. So you have John Norman Collins, we believe, living in the fraternity house, which is 0.2 of a mile away from the first victim. Okay. Secondarily, I found out that she had been playing a guitar at a beach. I forget what the name of the beach is, but it's somewhere around the Ypsilanti area. And that she had been approached by, according to my sources, John Norman Collins while she was at that beach. Now, whether that's true or not, I don't know. Talking about 50 some years ago, and hearsay, double hearsay, triple, quadruple hearsay, but yeah, it is what it is.
I think that right there, though, we kind of can frame that, because there does appear to be that there is a possibility of a connection. And I think this is important because you have witnesses that see them talking. She's basically, blowing the person off at first.
Yeah.
And we didn't see her get in the car, but it does give you that inkling that nobody saw a struggle, nobody heard any screaming, nobody heard any yelling. That perhaps there was some conversation, and then knowing that she perhaps knows that person, a possibility that she got into the car, which would have explained why nobody heard a struggle.
Right.
I think one other thing, discussing her and kind of, for everybody that didn't see it, I'll put a little link in there for the last issue or the last episode, is there's a situation where this wasn't a person that was just out there. She wasn't looking for a ride. She wasn't messing around. She was not the type of person drop and jump into cars and all of that. So kind of framing it in this manner is real important, that there is the possibility that they had at least had contact. I'm not saying we don't want to say they were known friends or buddies, but at least that there had been some sort of contact or some sort of connection there.
Right. So as we discussed before, there are about 5 books that I'm aware of that were written about what's called the Michigan murders. Okay. And the first book was written by Edward Keyes, who wrote The French Connection. Okay. It's a pretty well written book. This was written, I believe, in the 70s, shortly after the murders had occurred. Okay. And at that time, they thought John Norman Collins was the actual killer of all of them. When I say they, I mean law enforcement. Okay. Right. The second book, which was written in, I believe, 1996, which may be the first known catching serial killer book or book on serial killers. This was written by Lieutenant Earl James. Earl James was in the state police. He retired out, but he was actually in charge of evidence for the eventual, we're not there yet, but when we get to they set up a task force with all these different law enforcement agencies, and he was in charge of the evidence as to that. Okay. And the reason why, and I'll stop here just for a second to say, he didn't give, this is the book that I was kind of poo-pooing, though it's a great book as far as what knowledge is in there. It's kind of not well written because it was never edited. So yes. The original Michigan murder book, they used different names for all the victims to protect the victims' names. Okay. Mr. James tries to do the same thing, but doesn't use the same names as what's in this book.
Right. So let me stop there. I think that's one of the reasons, again, why this particular crime doesn't have the notoriety that when we're done with this, you would think it would have had.
Right.
I mean, it meets every criteria. But what we've just said is two of the better books that written by it. They didn't use any names of the original people, their real names.
Right.
The book on the French Connection, written by the French Connection person, I'll be honest, I have not read that one.
Mhm.
I have read the other book, Catching Serial Killers.
Or tried to, right?
Yeah.
It's a difficult read, to say the least.
I'll tell you what, it's a very good book if you just want to read raw notes.
Yeah.
Okay. But, for most of us, we probably, even myself, we probably have been spoiled with a little bit more of something that is a little bit more easy to read.
Right. The interesting thing too is he footnotes it in the middle. He goes into several different serial killers, but half the book is John Norman Collins related. Right. But the part that I wanted to read, and then I'll get to the other three books that were written, is that she says on May 5th, 1967, about 3 months before she was murdered, calling her Mona, but it's really Mary, contacted a doctor at Women's Hospital in Ann Arbor. This is part of University of Michigan hospital. She told the doctor she thought she was pregnant. She wanted an abortion. She told the doctor on the night of April 18th, 1967, she gave a fellow student a ride to Willis, Michigan. She said she was raped. She had stopped the car to let him out in this little village, and he had raped her. And then it goes on to discuss about that she thought she was pregnant. She thought she needed an abortion and some other things. I mean, not to disparage her, but
no, that's not bad. But I think it is good that if you sit there and you want to create not a profile, but an actual character, a person with real living, breathing emotions, you have to understand that she was claiming to have been raped and possibly pregnant with that.
Right. And then if you
person that might have been a little more cautious about just hopping in a car. Let's just put that in perspective, why we bring that up.
And remember, before she disappeared, she walked out of her apartment because it was too hot, and she was just walking down the street. She didn't have anything with her, I believe, but her keys. I don't remember what exactly.
Yeah, it was, and she didn't take anything with her from
She didn't take anything, not her purse, nothing, no identification or anything like that. So she's walking down the road, and somebody pulls up in a blue-gray car. Supposedly Mr. Collins or his mother may have had a car just like that at the time. Okay. So, and then the guy pulls up and he talks to her, and she kind of blows him off. And then he pulls in and kind of blocks her way when she's walking down the street. And then neighbor sees that. And I don't know whether they had terse words but it wasn't an exchange where she got in the car at that point.
Right. Then
that's the last time she was ever seen alive. So I just wanted to put that out there. So that's the two books. And then interestingly, the victim that we are most interested in, which is Jane Mixer, her niece. So her mother's sister's daughter became a Wesleyan English professor, and she's a really good writer. All right. So she publishes two books related to Jane Mixer, the victim. One is called Jane, and it is basically poetry written from the victim and her name, the professor's name is Maggie Nelson. And she compiled poetry from the victim and compiled it into a book. Okay. And there are fragments. It's touching. It's freaking painstaking knowing what happens. It's from her diaries from 61 to 62 or 3, and then some other things that she had written back and forth. And then she wrote a memoir called Red Parts. Same professor, same niece of the victim. This is when the trial was going on. So she is sitting in the courtroom and she's commenting on that. Okay. And then the last book, and this one was written, I believe, in 07 or 08, right after Gary Leiterman's, 07. So that's right after Gary Leiterman's conviction. And then the last book is written by Gregory Fournier, or Fournier. Hopefully I'm not butchering his name, called Terra in Ypsilanti. Okay. I've read this several times. I just listened to it again. It's a compilation basically of the first two books that I showed. It's well written. I think it's self-published. It's also on Audible, which is what I'm listening to, but I also bought the book so because I'm more tactile like you probably are.
Yeah.
But so all of the things that we're going to talk about today came out of these resources. And other than, as you know, I worked on Gary Leiterman's case, so I have some inside knowledge and sources. I actually had Mr. Fournier and his investigator in my law office before this book was published. So,
yeah, I think those first two books kind of explain why this didn't grab the attention of everyone. We also explained on a couple of other episodes about how, right or wrong, the whole Charles Manson thing in '69 would have swallowed this alive. This, when you get into co-ed murders and how brutal these things were, and the terror, which is actually what it was, terror that went through these communities, were all real. And it should be taken for what it is. I mean, it was all real, and it's all what happened, and it's all what we were dealing with at the time. I think there's something here that, as we go here and just do a recap on this for Mary's part of this, okay, was I don't think that there's anything that's came out through those books or through any of our other reading or just when you dealing with Gary there that would have explained it any more than what we know, that she's just out there walking because it's hot. We did discover, you went into a little bit more, that she had claimed that she had been raped, and I have no reason to doubt her, story. I don't. So no one think I'm saying anything there. She was trying to get an abortion. She was talking to people about that. This was a critical time of her life. And all of this happens. And it does kind of frame it for me to go, what I said in the last episode that we did was she just did not seem like a person who was just going to hop in the car with anyone.
Right.
So the connection that we started this on is that perhaps she had some working knowledge of who the person was. An interesting thing, and I'm going to add the link here, is about his fraternity time. John Collins' fraternity time. Add a little bit of that because there's going to be a link in the description here to discuss that.
Yeah, I had suspected, and I had said in the last episode that I perceived that. So John Norman Collins transferred, and I forget what college he came from, to Eastern Michigan University in 1966. He pledged and joined the Theta Chi fraternity, which their house, and is what I could find, was at 510 West Cross Street in Ypsilanti. And the Mary Fleszer's house was on 413 Washington Avenue, and these were 0.2 of a mile away. Okay, so that's a little suspect, close proximity. And Mr. Fournier, he has a really good blog that he had been running up until when he published the book, and he may still do it. But when I was searching, trying to find the address, and I found it on Fournier's site, it's called phrenology.com.
It'll be down there.
Yep, it'll be down there. And this specific article was written, or blog was written Wednesday, October 29th, 2014. It says John Norman Collins and the Code of Silence. Okay. And what he's talking about in this article or blog is the fraternity house. Okay. And we haven't got to the third victim yet, which is the one we were primarily interested in. But there is an allegation that a gentleman was going to pick up this victim, and his name was David Johnson. Well, this David Johnson was a member of Theta Chi fraternity at the time in 1969, which was John Norman Collins. I think he had been booted out by then for stealing stuff. Okay.
Right.
And in this article, it quotes a letter that had been recently at the time sent by John Norman Collins to a cousin. And it basically says, well, it actually says, and it's in quotes, all my friends I grew up with had older brothers, me included, and you just don't rat anyone out. You just didn't. if someone needed to be taken care of, we did it amongst ourselves. I still know things that could get people arrested today. Most of them have turned out pretty good, e.g. cops, lawyers, and even a judge. Should I ruin their lives now? I don't think so. There's a code I grew up with, and right or wrong, let God judge that. Still quotes. And then there's more. It says, then when I pledged Theta Chi with, and then it says in brackets, name withheld, we took an oath to always come to the aid of her brother. I took that oath seriously, and to rat out name withheld wasn't in the cards for me at the time. I kind of believed in the system and that they wouldn't convict an innocent man. While a few of us still believe in the brotherhood, a few of us do not. You're only good as your word. So I don't know what you want to take from that other than implicitly, it seems like he may or may not know more as to the murders in the actual murderer. But remember, and this is to tie it back to Miss Mary Fleszer, is that the two kids that found her, I believe they were 15, 16 years old, they went and reported it to the Michigan State Police local branch, was that they heard two doors slam on a vehicle. And they also heard voices.
Yeah.
When they found the carcass, or that what they perceived as a deer carcass, and it turned out to be, unfortunately, Mary Fleszer's body. So what I wanted to do with you, Joe, because you're a former police officer with all kinds of experience and even running a homicide division, what procedurally, how does it go? So somebody shows up and reports this, and then what is immediately going to occur? Do they just send a foot patrolman out? Do they send it?
No, I think what would have happened on that is there would have probably been the first responder, the first one or two people that went out there to see what the body was. But then at that point, you would have sealed that scene and you would have called everybody in. So it's not bing, bang, boom, like all the detectives show up. Mm-hmm. But the first responders, whether it was one or two field people, would have showed up, seen what they had. Once they confirmed that that was a body, then they would have shut the whole thing down. They would have blocked it off as a crime scene and then called in investigators and the rest of the team of the people that they were going to use or needed. So one of the things, and not being there, and in my reading, not seeing a lot of gigantic investigative notes on this, right? Mm-hmm. You don't know if they started off with that crime scene being small, growing big, or did that, crime scene, did they immediately realize it was going to be pretty huge? Without knowing that, you don't know how much collateral damage got done when you brought everybody in. Mm-hmm. One of my perspectives are, and we were always taught this, I think most police officers were, is it would be better to start the crime scene huge and then bring it in, mm-hmm. as opposed to having it small and then making it large. Okay.
Yeah.
The problem with that is, in this particular crime scene, was how long was that body out there? In the last episode, we talked about animals even getting involved, maybe people coming back and moving it. Okay. Yeah. So you have so much of that not being a pristine crime scene. I think this starts to become a problem. And a lot of times when books are written, or I listen to other podcasts, it's like, it's given to you like information is straight. Like, we showed up at the crime scene and we found A, B, and C. Okay, but then I'm always thinking, well, when you got to the crime scene, what actually happened? How was that done? How did you find that? I mean, somebody, it just didn't pop out, right? Yeah. So in this case, I think it's very important because we are speculating, because it's 50 years ago. Mm-hmm. Okay, is when they got there, there's probably a level of, we don't know what we have. Okay. And they would shut down that scene, see what they had, bring the people in. My guess is that it started small and got bigger, not because of a police mistake, mm-hmm. but because they didn't know what they had. Okay. Not a mistake. Like, I mean, that body had been out there so long that they thought it was a deer carcass.
Yeah.
Okay. So my guess is it started out small, then they made it bigger. They brought people in. I believe that if there had been any scene contamination, it wouldn't have been done then, even though they probably didn't have the perfect setup at first. Okay. Right. I believe it was just that long period of time where that body laid there. Okay. And we don't know how many times anybody came back or how animals mess with it or any of the other things that may sound gross, but they're true.
Yeah.
Okay. So we don't know. And you don't know how many people damage property, evidence, that walked through there and just kicked stuff and didn't even pay attention. And please do not think there's a body laying there so somebody would have noticed it.
Right.
Do not think that. Okay. I do not want you to go there because I'm not telling you that people didn't ride their bike, missed the whole thing, whatever. So that's going to be the problem with this. Not so much a tactical error.
Mm-hmm.
So I believe it would have started small and got big, which is the opposite of what you want. Okay. Yeah. I believe it was that length of time that scene was just left totally unattended.
Yeah. And I had misspoken in the last episode. I didn't think all the different agencies were involved, but because they got the Michigan State Police involved from the jump, then I think all of the county, the city, and the state were all involved in this investigation from the very, very beginning.
Yeah.
And there's a detective, I believe his name is Schumacher I believe it's the state police. It's kind of threaded throughout all of these different murders. But I wanted to frame it from your perspective. So you became a cop in the 80s, right? Early 80s?
Yes.
And so DNA still wasn't a thing yet, right?
No,
or what?
No, it was not. No.
So they didn't even have an inkling of it in 67.
Right. There was no. They were happy if they had a fingerprint.
Right.
Okay.
And so you and I had talked about it, and I don't remember whether we talked it on in our episode, but Miss Fleszer, unfortunately, one of her hands were removed, I believe, forearm. Yeah. And then the fingers of one hand, which you thought maybe that it was too much effort.
Yeah. That would be my guess.
Right. And then both feet were removed.
Yes.
And they were smashed. The unfortunately, and I don't want to be gross, but the bones were smashed and the feet were removed. And I don't know why they would remove the feet because they didn't. There's no fingerprints or toe prints, is there?
Yeah, I don't think so. I'm not sure that person just wasn't trying to remove some identifiers. Their dental records were there. Okay. Mm-hmm. This is one thing I really want to emphasize, and I think we're going to visit this over and over again. So as this grows, you're going to hear me say this if you're a listener over and over again. Mm-hmm. I think that we've all become junior profilers, and you and I talk about this all the time.
Yeah.
He could have seen something where he thought, okay, I'm going to make it hard for them to be able to identify her. Okay. Because I'm going to remove her fingers.
Yeah.
Okay. Mm-hmm. How that moved into feet, I'm not 100% sure. Okay. Mm-hmm. But if I had a guess, this was kind of his morbid plan of trying to make her difficult to identify. But what he found out that many people that have tried to dismember people is that is a grueling effort.
Right.
And what happens is you watch it on TV and it's like, they do it in 5 minutes, okay? And you watch it and you go, oh, it can't have been that hard. I watched a movie where they showed somebody that's what they did. They dismembered them and they show it in a broad way and it's like 2-minute scene. Well, he was out there realizing it was going to be hours, okay?
Yeah.
And probably moved on. But here's one thing, and I want our listeners to always do is that is the speculative belief. That is, I think, a common sense belief. Mm-hmm. I do not know that. I do not know what weird things were going through this weird person's mind. Mm-hmm. Okay? Right. Of what seemed like a good idea at the time. So I do feel comfortable to say that no other victims had this happen to her.
Right. And she was stabbed 30 times, but also, and you had brought it to the forefront last episode, is remember John Norman Collins is hanging out at the Bomber restaurant in the back on a round table with all the cops and all the detectives in the Ypsilanti, Ann Arbor area. I don't know how often he was there, but it comes into play at the second victim.
Yeah.
Also, but so he may have, this is just absolute speculation from his knowledge. And as you said, he was a police buff. Mm-hmm. thinking, well, you know, I can get rid of her hands, I can get rid of her feet, and they'll never know who it is, you know. But actually, they knew it from a whole bunch of, just from the shoe, you know, the shoe.
Yeah.
The parents knew exactly who it was.
Whoever did that, if that was their motive, had overthought that completely.
Yeah.
They had completely overthought it. They thought that's what I had. Now, I'm going to jump on this because it goes back into some other things. And that is, he is this person who's all involved into this, and he is very knowledgeable of this, and he may have just overthought that. But without being gross, okay, it is not unusual for people at first to try to dismember bodies, or they poured acid on, or they've done things, okay? The problem is that those things are very easy on TV, very difficult in reality.
Right.
Okay? And I think that's, regardless of the reason why he did it, he may have underestimated how difficult that is.
Mm-hmm.
But I do find it interesting. It was the only one that he tried to do that.
So when you begin an investigation of a murder, where do you start? Who do you start looking at first?
I think in this case, it wouldn't have been that. I think in this case, it would have been a who is this, not a who did this.
Really? You don't think they would look at somebody who she knew first?
We didn't know who she was. So you're stuck. So you're stuck with a who is this, not a who done it.
I got you.
Okay, because you don't know who it is. Okay. Mm-hmm. I will tell you two things that I think would have been problematic for them that is not procedure. Okay. Number one is what I just said. We don't know who she is. So who's these magical people that had contact with? We don't know.
Right.
Okay. And I think I would have immediately, and so would have they, thought that, and I'm not being funny. Okay, let me frame this. I'm not being funny. This is extremely unusual. And this is going to be something we're going to have to try to get every bit of information we can off this crime scene.
Right.
Because this is not and I'm just being straight up with you. This is not so-and-so got killed in their house after having an argument with their boyfriend. I wonder who did it.
Right.
Okay, that is not this. And I think that would have been the first two things. You would have went in there and known that this is not a who did it yet. This is who is this. And then the second part, which is even more frustrating, is that you are now trying to figure out how far does this crime scene go?
Yeah.
How much do we got to look at? This is not a situation where the murderer is in the room with you. Okay.
Yeah.
You know, this is not everybody knew somebody was mad at somebody. This was, you really knew somebody had done some work on this.
Yeah. You know, I've been reading about this crime and all the rest for the last about 10 years. Mm-hmm. And when I found, and I think you attached it to our last episode, that three or four panel photo of the crime scene, that told me more than everything I'd ever read about it.
Yeah. And it'll be in here too, because those links will be in this particular episode. And I think that's the truth. You know, you're looking about being outside, and do not beat this up, but for everybody to understand this, that when you are outside and the elements begin to take place, you have now changed the entire game.
Right.
Not, again, you know, I'm keeping it real. We've actually had murders where people found the body and then got all their friends and went and looked at it before the police ever knew. I mean, that's existed in this country.
Yeah.
That's right. That's right. They just, you know, it became a sideshow because people are, you know, I don't want to get lost on me, and I want to be real honest with you, and I don't want to share about a zillion war stories, but I've seen enough things where we were trying to secure murder scenes. I saw enough vampire behavior of just gross, sick people trying to get a close look that there is nothing gross, sick people can do to surprise me.
Well, in this case, go ahead. I'm sorry.
You know, so again, this ain't all about me. I'm just telling you, if you don't think that somebody couldn't have walked by that scene, saw it, and brought their friend out and never told anybody, that's because you just don't know how bad people can be.
Yeah.
I have watched people run into crime scenes so they can get a close look at the body and don't even know the person.
Yeah.
Okay. That's not some book I read. I saw it.
Right.
Okay.
Well, and remember, there were at least two people there that day when the two teenagers found them, and also some young man came wanting to take pictures of the body at the funeral home without a camera.
Right. Yeah. There is some vampire behavior there that we're going to visit that over and over again, because there's just, we talk crime scene, and here's what you think. They got there and they hung this magical tape. And this magical tape secured everything. And this magical tape made all of the problems go away. He said, just like that, we hung some crime scene tape and all our problems went away. Because of this scene, and this is not a tactical error. I don't even know if they put the crime scene in the right place. Check the link, see how big it is.
Yeah, look at it. And look, it's high grass.
Yeah.
It's secluded, so anybody could do anything. You could have looky-loos that found it and be coming back.
Yeah.
It could be anything. And there was a fallen down barn there. They had found all kinds of evidence that was not related to, or they didn't know at the time whether it was related to the crimes.
Right. And I think you need to keep that in mind, is particularly if you are a crime buff. Don't get lost into the magic crime scene tape. Okay. Because we have had crime scenes where, and I will tell you something, I thought we were really good in both police departments I worked at. I'm not saying that because I was there. I always thought we were professional.
Mm-hmm.
I've seen us put the sign big and then bring it back in. I remember being at a auto fatality where we were dealing with one person only to find another body about 75 yards away.
Wow.
They got ran over. We didn't know we had to fix it. And I'm not going to get lost on that particular story, but I've never been more disappointed in humanity in my life watching the vampire. Never in my life have I been more disappointed. Right. Later, I got seasoned and nothing people could do could disappoint me, but I was a new guy. Okay? So it doesn't work like that. You know, there's no magical crime scene tape. This stuff is a moving, flowing, living investigation. And in the case of this one, I am sure, because we don't know if people came back and moved them. We don't know all the stuff that animals did. We do know that animals were there.
Yeah.
There were signs of that. So
yes.
It's just changing all of that. I am not surprised that I wouldn't have been surprised if nobody else showed up. Don't misunderstand me. I would have not been surprised. But the fact that more agencies showed up, because I'm sure when they walked out there, they thought this isn't good.
Yeah, right.
And I'm not being funny. They looked at that and said, this is not good. I got to deal with it.
Yeah.
So it's pretty interesting. I think two things before we leave off of this one and get ready for next week's, where we're going to go into the second victim. And let me say this, and this is the first thing I want to say. There is two threads through everything you mentioned, and it's this: John Collins killed everybody by himself, and everybody believed that until the Gary Leiterman DNA, and we'll talk about that with Mixer, because at the end of the day, we're going to come completely around, and that's what we're going to focus on. But you got to know the rest of it, okay?
Mm-hmm.
That John Collins did all of this himself, by himself, all by himself, okay? Not until Gary's DNA, which we'll get into the other one, is anybody ever thinking he did anything, but this was John Collins. Okay?
Right.
Number two, a thought process that all of these crimes are alike. And that, you know, you're chasing down this thing and you're putting these pieces with all these like-minded stuff. I don't think there's any evidence, if anybody did a real investigation, that John Collins did this by himself on every one of these, to including the next young lady we talk about that got into the car with 3 people.
Yeah. Joan Shell.
Give me your name again.
Joan Shell.
Yeah. She got in the car with 3 people. Okay. Her friend watched her get in the car with 3 people. Okay?
And had an uneasy feeling, she said.
Yeah. She got in the car with 3 people. 3 people she had never seen before.
Yep.
We're not putting the girl down. People do what they do. It's 1968.
Yep.
Different place and time. Okay. And then this mysterious and most misleading is that all of these crimes are alike, which I will go on record before we even go to another episode and go, I don't know how anybody that spent 5 minutes looking at this thinks that.
Right.
They are all incredibly different, to include one young lady who there is no way she got in the car with anybody. You don't have enough time. I'm not speculating. Nobody has enough time in their life to explain to me after walking all the way from a mall, I believe, that 150 yards from her house, she apparently needed a ride.
Right.
Okay. Didn't happen. Nobody got enough time to explain that one. She didn't get in the car.
Right.
Totally different than all the rest in a lot of other ways. So I think that that's one of the things, because this didn't get that deep look. It doesn't get the national coverage. It doesn't. And we knew, they knew he had killed somebody in California.
Right.
There's no reason this didn't have national coverage other than space and time.
Yeah.
Okay? Charles Manson, the war. We did 2 episodes trying to explain to you why things are what they are.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
That's why we did 2 episodes. So people who are listening to this will understand the concept in which this happened. And you ask me, why does it matter? But because all this was happening, this case never got the intensity it should have gotten for somebody to look at it. Because there's 2 things I want to assure everybody of. There are more than one person involved in this, and there's all sorts of evidence of other people being involved.
Yeah.
And 2, none of these are alike.
Yeah.
None of them. They all have enough differences. And if you go, Joe, well, there's a lot of similarities. I didn't say that. I just said for anybody to say they're all alike, there's not that many similarities. There's some stuff that is incredibly different.
Yeah.
And interestingly enough, some interesting backstories. And we're not here to put anybody down, but there are some people that fall in that traditional, they got in cars with strangers, which we would suggest you never do,
Right.
without putting any blame on it. So give us the name of the second victim.
It's Joan Shell. And just to tee that up, she was waiting for a bus, I believe, to go find her boyfriend, who was AWOL from the Army at the time.
Yes.
And either the bus was late or it wasn't going to come. I can't remember exactly what.
Drove right by her because it was full.
All right. So then she got a ride with 3 guys in a red convertible with a black top, I believe, pretty close to the Eastern Michigan University Field Student Services Building or something like that, where at the time John Norman Collins happened to work, and who somebody with his description was found walking through that building that night with 2 other guys.
Mm-hmm.
And remember, he is still a Theta Chi. I believe he hadn't been booted out yet for thievery, but and just to tee it up even more so, John Norman Collins stole a Triumph motorcycle, which is in this Fournier article that we'll have the linked, that he happened to be riding when he picked up the last victim, which was Meineman, the Triumph motorcycle that he stole from his frat brothers in Theta Chi. So the threads are starting to, we haven't got there yet. We're just starting out. We're just laying the groundwork. This is the first victim. They don't know it's going to be a serial killing. They know that this is probably different than any other murder. I mean, they were saying, all the police were saying this was the most horrendous thing they had ever seen, and maybe it wasn't at Ypsilanti, Ann Arbor area in 1967. But so that kind of tees up for where we're heading next. I think I've covered everything that I wanted to cover. I wanted to go more into what the police procedure and the lawyer issues was, but we can do that on the next episode. But me, as a defense attorney, I start thinking of what is the evidence, what are the witnesses, and then how was the investigation done? Was it botched? Was it not botched?
Yeah. And how much of it could have been just completely legitimate when you have that much destruction to a crime scene?
Oh man, and how vast it was. When you look at when you see that picture, that 4-picture thing, you go, holy crap. I mean, they'd have to be sifting through the weeds in order to find it all.
Yeah. And let me share something. When we say botched, there are crimes that are just botched. I mean, let's be honest. I mean, there's crime scenes that have been botched. I mean, let's not get all crazy. But well, sometimes when you say botched, you just started off in a bad place.
Yeah.
And this would have been one of them where I don't have any problem saying you would have started off in a bad place. And
Well,
by the
like you
way,
said, you don't even know the victim at the moment you step
yeah.
on the crime scene.
Now I'm going to share something crazy with everybody. There is a belief that most murders are a whodunit. Okay. And that there's a murder mystery to all of these murders. And in actuality, there's not. Most of the murders, we know who did it. We show up and we know who did it. We show up, and if we didn't know who did it before we got off and out of there, we knew who did it. You know, the old show about the first 48 hours or whatever that was, you know. That show is kind of, I didn't like that title because a lot of times those first investigators, it's like we did it. Well, you know, one of the reasons you solved this, master detective, and we always joked about this, don't get me wrong, because we knew it. Somebody walked up and told us. That was it. So he said, hey, you know, they're the ones that killed him.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I mean, if it wasn't for quality information and people who would step forward, we probably wouldn't have solved half of them. You know, we were thankful for it, but we did. A lot of times he said, wow, I'm glad there because there was this weird thing, that weird thing, and this one. The further detached you get from time and the further you get detached from the moment of the crime, the harder it is to do it because the more likely that these easy answers, and I hate to use that term, easy answers with these whodunits become complicated. And this would have definitely fell into complicated. Okay. And so, you know, those are the kind of things that you're trying to deal with. And again, not being flip, but a lot of times, you know, we get to the scene, we knew who did it. Or before we were done investigating, somebody had pointed us in the right direction or even told us. Okay. And I'll tell you this, blow some people's mind. You know how we catch a lot of murderers? Because they tell their friends and their girlfriend. You then turn them in for money. We stick them in jail. There you go. How about that? Right. How about that to how to solve a whodunit? Okay. A case that we're dealing with Mary, that just wouldn't exist. That the chances of somebody being that brutal and telling anybody is slim and none. Though we will find in later episodes, John Norman Collins got very close to doing it. Yeah, very close to doing that. So listen, everybody, regardless of what platform you're listening to, please hit the subscribe button for Two Average Joes. Yeah. Please show your support. Look, this is not the most expensive production in the world, but nothing's free. So if you could help us, support us, we'd appreciate it in any ways. Your dimes and dollars are greatly appreciated. Hit the button, leave us even a little bit of money. I'm not going to lie to you. I'm going to be real honest with you. This is not The Godfather. Okay, we're not spending $1 zillion on production, but it's not free either. Yeah, so we'd appreciate your support on that. Anything else, my friend?
Only to remember for the next episode, John Norman Collins is going to show up as a suspect. Okay, that they quickly dismissed because his uncle is a state police trooper. I think at the time, I don't know whether he'd been promoted up to sergeant or whatever the heck he made it up to, but. So he shows up on the second murder. So, you know, we were talking about botching something, and I'm not saying they botched it, but there are at least 5 other women that die after this that are attributed to him. Yeah. And this is the thing that Joe and I, when we've been talking all along, Joe's like, there's got to be more people than just one person because the way this is going down, it doesn't. So John Norman Collins, and I think it's the 5th one, he takes off to California. He writes a bad check for a camper and goes out there with a guy named Emmanuel, I think, or Manuel. And it's going to really come into play on the 3rd victim, but just know that they had him pretty much dead to rights on that California murder. Ronald Reagan, who became president, was the governor at the time, and they wanted to try him and fry him in California. Yeah. And there were legal battles about that. So I just wanted to set the stage for the second victim. But
the spoiler alert: the people in Michigan were more worried about his buddy stealing a trailer and writing a bad check than the dead person. And that is
FBI finally got involved because of the interstate theft than they did all the murders that were occurring.
Yeah.
Oh, well.
So there you go. We're going to have to work on that and clear that. Well, if there's nothing else, my friend, we'll see everybody next week. We appreciate your support and hope to see you soon. And
See ya.
take it easy.
See ya.